Here at the Warrior Woodshop, we're framed for success. Welcome to the Warrior Woodshop. In our technique units, we teach the students how to do pocket hole joinery. And with each of our technique units, we like to let them do a little bit of practice before they go off and attempt their big furniture project of the final project for the semester. But with today's economy and lumber prices where they are, we don't just want to basically make a bunch of scrap material and throw it in the firewood bin. We do enough of that already. So we come up with a pocket hole picture frame. Now this is not your traditional picture frame because it doesn't have mitered joints. It has 90-degree butt joints. Well, traditionally butt joints aren't very strong. That's where pocket holes come in for reinforcement. Then we will cut a rabbet on the inside to allow the glass and the picture backing to set in frame, and then give it a good coat of finish depending on what material we're using. This is also a great project to use up some scrap material. Our students are going to be starting with pre-planered, pre-milled lumber. You can do this with half-inch lumber. You're going to need to adjust the settings on your pocket hole system for half-inch. We're going to do this all with 3/4. All right, before you start any picture frame project, you probably need to know what you're going to frame. In 2010, I had the opportunity to meet Norm Abrams from This Old House and the New Yankee Workshop television shows. I got his autograph on this magazine cover, but I put it in this discount store frame, and that just hasn't done justice. Sorry about that, Norm, but I do appreciate the autograph. So what better way to show proper justice to this autograph magazine cover is to put it in a custom frame. And I said it has to be a custom frame because one, it's a woodworking, we better build our own. But two, this is an 8.5 by 11. It's an odd size or certificate size. And so your typical 8 by 10 picture frame won't work. So that's the first thing we need to determine is our frame size. The other thing we're going to do at the same time is we're going to be showing clips of the 5 by 7 frame because this is more likely what our students are going to choose, especially with lumber prices the way they are, on how to do a more common size picture frame. But if you notice, the frames I'm holding up, they're done. Well, these are discount store frames. And with a picture frame, you typically don't need high tensile strength safety glass. If you do, go to a local hardware store or glass shop and definitely get that. But with these discount store frames, the glass is thinner, the back panel is a little bit thinner, so you got everything ready to go there. And they're inexpensive. Because let's be realistic. That's the frame the glass came from. So, had enough of this, let's make a good one. So we have this chart that we give the students in our class, and again, if you'd like these instructions and this chart, the link to a Google document is in the description below. And just fill the chart out, we'll walk through it here so we know our frame or photo is 8.5 by 11, and our frame width is going to be 1.5. Here, our short photo size is 8.5, minus the 3/4 for the rabbit. That equals out to 7/4. All right. So now let's do the long side. 11 minus the 3/4 for the rabbit. That equals out to 10 1/4. But we need to add back 2 of the picture or frame rails. Each one of those is 1.5. So that's 13 1/4. All right, the last thing we need to do on that chart is kind of figure out how much rough material we're going to use. So what we're going to do, due to safety on the miter saw or cross-cutting jigs, is the pieces are small to be handling individually. And if you have to do any surface milling, it's going to be easier to have a longer piece anyways. But what we're going to do is take one long piece, one short side on one section, and the other long side and the other short side on the other section. So we'll rip this down the middle. We need to calculate those two lengths together. So we're going to put our 7 3/4 plus our 13 1/4, which equals out to 21. That is the two added together, so we need to add 1 to 2 inches for rough cutting and squaring. So in this case, our pieces are going to be 23 by 1.5. Sorry about the typo there. So we'll make 2 of those pieces on the table saw and miter saw to those sizes. Be sure to square up both ends of both pieces on the miter saw before you do any measuring. Alright, we're back here at the workbench. We're going to go ahead and mark out one of our pieces with our short side and our long side final length. The advantage to squaring up both ends is we can mark out the short side from one end, the long side from the other end, and then leave our scrap in the middle, and we only have to lay out once at the workbench and we're good to go. One of the key things you want to make sure of is that you actually don't undercut your piece, especially if you're using a pre-cut glass. So I'm actually going to leave about 32nd to a 16th long. Alright, if it was pushing the 6-inch margin of safety to cut these 10-inch pieces and still hold them, how are we going to hold a 4.5 or 5-inch piece? Well, that's where this jig comes into play. We call it a small parts jig. It's just simply 2 pieces of plywood bolt or screwed together with a hold down clamp. This way you can position it on there and rest your piece on top. Make sure when you set this up that this is against the fence and so are your pieces. You want to make sure that this snaps into place. Adjust the stop nut if it's not tight enough. See the instructor if you're not sure how to do that. Next, we'll line it up just like we did before, leaving about a 32nd to 16th long, and we'll set our stop block up for the jig rather than, and we can hold the jig out here and make our cut. Alright, we're back from the miter saw using the stop blocks, and we're going to do what we call a dry fit, which is basically putting the puzzle together without any glue or fasteners to make sure we got everything in the right place and the right size. Now, reminder, our size should be 3/4 of an inch less than what we intended it to be. So let me check. 6 1/4, a little strong. 4 1/4 strong. You notice I'm saying strong there because the glass is coming 5 by 7, so we want it to be a little bit too big because we don't want to have to force glass in there. You know what's going to happen if you try that. The next thing you need to do is determine fronts and backs. So we've got these all positioned with the face side down, back side up, so we can do some marking. The only pieces that need marking or drilling, excuse me, are where the end grain touches the side grain. And we are going to have a whole unit or a whole video out on pocket hole joinery. So be looking for that one in the future. So that gives you an opportunity to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell notification. So we're going to go over all different applications for pocket hole joinery, not just the picture frame. Now, when it comes to doing marking, you can use any system you like, but I usually just put a line approximately where I want the pocket screw to go or pocket hole. And in this case, we're only doing a single line or a single screw, so a single line's enough. So as long as we don't want it too close to the edge for our rabbet, we don't want it too close to the other edge, the outside edge for our router profile. So that's the only reason we're putting one screw in here. They want to be eyeball centered, but they don't have to be perfectly centered. So I just go ahead and put a freehand line. These two I've left alone. All right, now we're on to actually the pocket hole jig. This is a little bit older unit. Some of the newer ones have accessories on the sides and vacuum attachments, but this one still works. You also need what is known as a step drill bit with a stop collar that should be provided with your kit. And what it does is it drills the counter bore and the pilot hole and then tells you where to stop. On the jig, it usually has some sort of indicator how deep to set it up. So we are checking that. In my history, I found that you wanted to basically barely poke through the end grain. If you're only doing this at home, a cordless drill will do the job. I just seen it wear down batteries pretty quick, especially in hardwood materials. So we always recommend using the electric drill. Now that you got your drill set up, the stop collar is set. You want to take your piece that's going to get the holes. When it comes to positioning your work, you've got 3 sets of holes. Sometimes they're labeled A, B, and C on the older jigs. They may not be labeled. You got a set that wide, medium, narrow, but we're only drilling 1 hole, so we're going to take our mark side and position it towards the drill, basically eyeball centering it there, and then clamp it into place. You want to start with it inside. You don't want to try to line it up, so start with it inside the jig. Hit the trigger. They have a chip ejection system on the back. It doesn't always work. Be sure to rotate and not flip. We want to drill in about halfway, clear out the chips. Don't pull it all the way out, and then go ahead and finish the cut. Well, we're basically at assembly time, and there's a few special tools and a few regular tools that you're going to need to put this frame together. One is we want to use a cordless drill and not an impact driver. Most impact drivers do not have a clutch setting, and they could overdrive, which would mean the screw would poke out the front. Because of the angle of the drill, you're going to have to use a long square drive bit, and that's a specialty bit designed for pocket screw. If you have a short square drive, it's going to be too steep of an angle and again poke out the front. You cannot use typical drywall screws. You have to use what is known as a pocket hole screw, because if you notice, the threads do not go all the way to the top, and they have a washer type style head which helps pull the joinery tight together. The last thing you got to consider is, are you using a hardwood or softwood material? Our pine frame is a softwood material, so we're going to use the coarse thread. Our walnut frame is a hardwood material, so we're going to use the fine thread. So check with your instructor if you're in the Warrior Wood Shop. Otherwise, do some research on your material type and pick your screws accordingly. All right, there are a few ways out there, especially on the internet, of how to hold this together while you're assembling pocket screws. What the manufacturer sends with it is what they call face frame clamp, kind of like a locking pliers, and you get everything lined up, snap it in place, and that'll hold both sides flush as long as your material is the same thickness, and you can drive it in from the outside. On a small picture frame, this is a challenge to try to hold. I guess you could go like that, that would work. They do make assembly tables for these type of joints. They are a little bit expensive, especially for the amount that we would need. Each one of the clamps are anywhere from $25 to $40. So we have come up with our own. Now this one's not as fancy as the one that the manufacturer sells, but it uses a basically locking clamp, and we're going to get it all positioned, make sure everything works like it should. We want the foot of the clamp to be right on the seam. You can see how much simpler that goes, and still allows us to drill the screws. So now that I know everything works, let's apply some glue and get this first joint screwed together. If you're using glue, be sure to clean up with a wet t-shirt or rag both the frame and the jig, so you don't get glue on the face of your next side. You want to do both short sides, because otherwise you've got to separate this to try to get the other piece in place. Don't forget to check the inside corners either for glue squeeze up. And for the last side, just apply glue to both. So before we do all the inside routering, I like to have everything perfectly flat, because even though that jig holds everything flat, there's still a little bit of a lip sometimes. So, and the router will go up or down, so I like to have that perfectly flat and smooth. So what I'm going to do is take 100 grit and right now just get off all my pencil marks and sand the face and the back. save the 150 and 220 after we've done our inside routering and our profile routing. That just gets everything flat for the next step, which is creating the wrapping. All right, again, as we discussed, to get to where the glass and the pitcher and the back mat can go into place, we need to use a rabbiting bit. If you're going to put some matting and an extra thick foam board back, you might have to do this in 2 passes to go extra deep. Check with the instructor or consult your manual if you're doing this project at all. Now traditionally on the outside of the frame you'll go counterclockwise, but since we're on the inside of the frame, you've got to go clockwise to stay against the rotation of the router bit. Alright, I'm sure by now you're kind of had enough of the math on this project. I mean, all the algebra, 1 plus this length plus that length, and well, now we got a little more math to deal with. This one's not so hard, but it is still a geometrical problem. We have radiused corners because of our router bit. The problem we're running into is our backboard and glass are square. So it's not such a big deal to cut or sand off some corners on a backboard, but rounding glass is a little bit more of a challenge. So it's going to be easier to adjust the wood than it is going to be to adjust the glass. This is the one downside that I've seen to doing the pocket hole frames, is you don't get with the miter corner, you get a perfect corner. To get the corner square, the simplest thing I found is to use a tri-square and mark out the square corner so that you can follow it up with a chisel and get a pretty good corner. Something to keep in mind when you're doing the chiseling step, softwood is easier than hardwood. So think about that when you're choosing your material. Remember, cut away from yourself. To protect the face from extra marring, we'll use a piece of carpet or a router mat. If your end pieces don't match up with your short side, you may go to the belt sander and lightly sand them to even it up. However, be careful, you can do more damage than good with this step if you aren't careful. Using a table router, router a profile on all of the outside edges. All right, there we have it. Got our 5x7, all 5x7, and our 8.5x11. Let's make sure everything fits like it should before we head over to the stain table. After the first coat of clear coat has had a chance to dry, buff it with 220 or 320 grit sandpaper, and then reapply a second coat of clear. After the paint and clear coat have a chance to dry, insert the glass, your photo and matte material, and the backboard. We're going to use things called framing points, which this tool is a point driver. You can get them, you can install with pliers or a hammer and nail, but if you're going to do a lot of them, this is the way to go. Now we got to think about how we're going to hang these on the wall. One, you can screw right through the frame, but that's that would basically demeanor the awesomeness that we've just spent all this time making. Another one is to put a couple screws with a thin wire. That works also. But what the method we're going to use is what's called a sawtooth or alligator clip hanger. So we want to center it. And there's a little, just eyeball center it. Take a pre-drill, depending on what material you're using, and then follow up with your screws. There we are. Significant improvement. I honestly feel a little bit embarrassed because this is a television woodworker's autograph on a woodworking magazine, home improvement magazine. For 10 years now, I've had it in a discount store frame. That really doesn't do him justice. Sorry about that, Norm. But it was a great day in the shop to build this picture frame for something that means something to me. So the ultimate question is, what are you going to put in the frame? If you're out there in YouTube land, leave a comment. Let me know what you're going to put in the frame. So all it's left to say is, let me grab these other ones to show you how we'd spend our day. So we spent a good day in the shop building all 4 of these frames, 4 different materials, 4 different sizes. The awesome part of this is you can customize it, plus we have an opportunity to work on our pocket hole joinery. At first you may have thought, and truly myself, I was like, picture frames have to be 45 degrees in the corners. No, they really don't. If you think about cabinet doors, glass cabinet doors are made this very similar method. So it does justice. It's a quick way to get a picture frame without complicated 45-degree joinery. Maybe your miter saw isn't accurate, you don't have a miter saw. This is a perfect opportunity to, one, practice your pocket hole joinery and get something out of it. Uses up some scrap material too. So again, leave a comment. What are you going to put in your picture frame? If you're students, if you're in the class, think about this. Your senior photo, a brother or sister or cousin got married, put their wedding photo in here. Did your brother, sister, cousin, are you a new aunt or uncle? So your niece or nephew. This is a perfect opportunity for a baby announcement. What's cool about the pocket hole joinery is all 4 sizes don't have to be the same size. And I wish I would have thought about that and made an example. But this bottom rung, and even the top, but this bottom rung most likely could be a different width. And you could carve in a date, a vacation photo, a family photo, the yearly vacation family photo. You could put the year, the location, your graduation date, a wedding date, anniversary, all those things. So you can really customize when you make your own frame. Plus it uses up scrap material. So it's a perfect day in the shop project when it's rainy outside or it's cold. So again, I want to find out what you guys are putting in your frames out there in YouTube land, and hopefully you got some pocket hole joinery experience in the same process. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, so when we do make the entire pocket hole video on how to use pocket holes in furniture building, you get that notification also. So thanks for watching. Now go out and make some sawdust.